Hello and welcome to Effin Hormones, the podcast about perimenopause and beyond. Hey, and guess what? We've only got an actual MP for you on this episode. And it's not just any old MP. You're going to be hearing from Carolyn Harris, who's been doing absolutely loads to help people going through menopause. You'll hear all about what she's been up to very, very shortly. We've got so much to talk to Carolyn about that this episode is pretty much all about her. But it's not just me. Effin Hormones is also my mate Terry and Bina.
Woo,
and Helen
woo, woo.
is not here.
She's on strike.
Helen's on strike this episode. She's in solidarity with all the strikers.
It's
Go,
the
Helen.
1st of February when we're recording this.
It's strike
Yeah.
day, but you are sadly missed, Helen. But are we all right, guys? Are we all right, gang?
All grand. Starting to get light now. I mean, today it was 5 o'clock and it was still just light. I was like, yeah. And it's the end of January, which went on for far too long.
Bina, did you even do dry January? I had the
No.
longest January out of everybody. Didn't even have a single drop of drink. Absolutely nothing.
Mentalist.
I will
And-
never do dry January.
I worked out far too late that January had 5 Sundays in it. Sundays are made for drinking real ale like an old man in a pub. And I couldn't do it.
Real ale.
That's five.
Is that your tipple?
Five Sundays without ale.
Yeah.
Love real ale.
Oh,
Brilliant.
bring it
Brilliant.
on. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I find that, just doing this podcast is not enough. I feel like I want to talk about the menopause 24/7. And sometimes I get a better response to this than other times. So, for example, last weekend I went to my Slimming World meeting and the lady running it just totally forgot what she was saying mid-sentence and went, oh no, menopause, brain fog. And then everyone started talking about the menopause. So then I had to pipe up about our podcast,
Right.
told them all about it, chipped in the conversation, did a posting on the Slimming World Facebook group, link into our Facebook group, all of that. But then, and that was great because, it was a captive room of middle-aged women, basically. But then I do find myself having conversations about the menopause where it's entirely inappropriate and people have got no idea what the fuck I'm talking about. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I went to Timpson's to get my keys cut. There was a man behind the counter who must have been about 19. And it must have been on my brain for some reason. I just started talking about how good Timpson's menopause policy was.
No, but that's good.
But it is apparently really good, and they treat their employees very, very well, actually, that company.
Yeah, but that's that kind of thing you could tweet James Timpson and he'd
Yeah.
be so pleased to hear that, like, for sure. Like, yeah,
Well,
that's brilliant.
the 19-year-old boy that I was talking to had not even ever heard the word menopause. He was like, what's that? And there's this woman in the queue behind me just laughing hysterically as I'm trying to explain what the menopause is to a teenage boy.
Well, you're having your
Did you
key
get the
cut.
woman from the queue to listen to the podcast?
No, I should have done. Damn, I missed a trick there.
Oh my god.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. No, that's brilliant. I've got a sort of slightly different issue in that a lot of people from work and a lot of people who I don't even necessarily know, but where I work, if I speak to them and I've not necessarily had an interaction before, they go, "Oh, I've heard your podcast," which part of me is like, "Oh, brilliant, that's great," and then the other half of me is like, "Oh my god." That's also slightly mortifying because of the stuff we talk about and how much. So I'm like, and this is probably how a lot of people probably feel who are out there with a bit of a public profile, is you know way more about me than I know about you.
Yeah.
It's a little bit disconcerting. So it's great. I love it that people are listening, but I am also like, oh my God, what are you thinking whilst I'm trying to have this serious conversation with you about work? What are you actually thinking about? Are you thinking about vaginal dryness?
Yes. That's exactly what they're thinking, Bina, when they're talking.
No, I hope not. I really hope not.
Yeah. It's easy to forget that people are actually listening and paying attention.
Yeah. One of my friends I've not seen for years. She's an old colleague and was a really good friend, but we've sort of not seen each other in a long time. And she listens to the podcast, and actually it's been really nice in that sense because you forget who's listening, or I don't know who's listening, because we've got a lot of listeners now, which is brilliant. But she got in touch and said, we have to stop doing this Christmas card thing where we say, we will see each other this year, because we haven't for years. She listened to the podcast and she picked up on something I'd said in the podcast and was like, right, we definitely have to do this year. So we're getting a date in. I haven't given her a date yet that when we can do, but we're finally going to meet up, and it's been donkey. So it's helping bring old friends together as well, this podcast. Yeah.
That's great.
Fantastic. I love it. Aww.
But I have to think like you as well, Bina, when someone says they've listened and you're like, what did I say in it? Or oh my God, how it's a bit mortifying, isn't it?
Yeah, what did I say at that?
Yeah. But then we hear the likes of, oh my God, my brain's gone dead. The couple we had on, amazing couple. But you hear them talking about
JB and Sharon.
JB and Sharon. When you hear Sharon talking about the impact that the podcast has had on her life, you think that's what it's about, isn't it? That's why we need to keep doing this.
Yeah, and I have to say, the whole reason we said we wanted to do this was because nobody was talking about it, and I guess that's part of the slight feeling mortified from time to time is the fact that we've chosen to do this and stop making it breaking the taboos around it and talking about it more openly. So yeah, I can put up with a bit of cringe, I guess, from time to time, if it makes a difference to someone like Sharon, for sure.
Yeah.
Right, it is now time for you to hear from our guest for this episode. Now, many of us do lead very busy lives, so engaging with politics might not be top of your list, especially when things feel so bloody grim at the moment. And as usual, there's a lot of negative press around about politicians, so it's easy to forget that there are MPs from across the political spectrum who are fighting hard for their constituents on causes they feel passionate about. Well, Carolyn Harris is one of those MPs. She's the Labour MP for Swansea East, and she's also the chair of the Menopause All Party Parliamentary Group. You'll hear exactly what that is very soon. But let me first tell you that Carolyn breaks a lot of the stereotypes of what you might expect an MP to look like or be like. For a start, she is looking resplendent right now in bright red hair, although it has been pink and it will be purple in the near future. So, Carolyn, welcome to Effin Hormones.
Thank you for having me. It's an effing pleasure.
Hello. Thank you.
It is an effing pleasure. Well, we will get on to the menopause shortly, obviously. But first of all, you're not maybe what a lot of people think of when they think about an MP. And you definitely don't come across, I don't think, as being a career politician. So
God, no.
How did you get into that game?
Oh, God, long story short. Right time, right place, I suppose. I never thought I was the material to be a politician, so I didn't do it when I should have done it maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I waited till I was 55. But literally, I was in the right place at the right time, and I got selected, and I got elected. So I very much have the mind that in order to get the most out of this job, I need to use it as a platform to make change, to make other people's lives better, which is what I tried to do up until now. But definitely not a career politician. I was a dinner lady and a barmaid, for God's sake.
I love it.
Yeah, nobody ever thought I was going to be a politician.
And was that good grounding for being a politician? I mean, you've got to meet a lot of people, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think my entire life has been good grounding because I see things in other people who maybe have been in this game for different reasons to me don't see. So I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to have troubles in your life. I know what it's like to be worried about where the next meal is going to come from. So when I talk about those things, I'm not just trying to think what it must be like. I actually know what it's like. And I think that makes me more productive in trying to affect change because I talk about stuff that I've experienced.
And I bet your constituents really relate to you for that reason, don't they?
Yeah, I suppose so. But, politicians there's a perception about politicians that we are, it's a little bit like teachers, You don't think teachers got a private life. You think teachers are locked in a cupboard at the end of the school day and they open the cupboard the next morning and they come out. And I think people think that of politicians. So sometimes you go to places and they've obviously tidied up or maybe painted or put the best clothes on because they know you come in. And I get really embarrassed about that because that makes me think that they think that I'm something special, and I'm not something special, and no politician is special because they're only there because of the people they represent. So I always want to meet the expectations of my constituents. I want to be there for them, but I don't want them to put me on a pedestal and think that, I got there because I was clever or I was talented, because anyone could do what I'm doing, anyone.
You say that, Carolyn, but you have managed to get 2 bits of legislation through Parliament, which for our political system is a pretty impressive thing to do. So for those people who don't know, one of those was about changing the amount of money that fixed odd betting terminals paid out. And the other one was to create the Children's Funeral Fund, which means that parents get that support at a time when they need it the most. Now, how do you manage to get MPs from all across the political spectrum to support you and get what you want, really?
Because I only ever ask for things which are the right thing to do. So with the Children's Funeral Fund, I lost my son Martin in a road accident when he was 8, and I was a dinner lady at the time. My husband was a manual worker on the railway, so finding money for a funeral for our child was just not something we'd ever thought was going to be needed. So we just didn't have the money. We found the money. Friends gave us money, did a collection, and David went and took a back loan out, and we paid for the funeral. But I know how painful that was, and I don't think I realised until years later how painful that was, because it was one of those emotions that got buried in the grief. When I realised later on in life just how embarrassing it was that we didn't have the money, and how inadequate I felt because I didn't have the money. And that's when I did go into Parliament and thought, right, I could see the lay of the land, if you like. I could see that I now suddenly had a captive audience. I had that chamber, and there were certain times that I could say things and nobody could question it. And that's what I did. So I done it. And once I'd said it once, I think people were stunned into silence when I said it. And then all of a sudden, whenever I got up to speak, people were like holding their breath to think, oh my God, what's she going to say now? And in the end, they knew I wasn't going to go away until I did get the right answer. And in the end, I did get the right answer. But I lost 3 pieces of legislation.
Oh, sorry.
Because the menopause, the
brilliant.
HRT for women in England will now happen from April the 1st, because as the one annual a year fee of £18.70 because of the latest piece of legislation. But again, it's something that doesn't affect me because I don't pay.
Let's
for
have a
my
round of applause just for that alone. Woo! And everything else.
Exactly.
But
Brilliant.
that doesn't benefit me because I don't pay for my prescriptions. I live in Wales. But, I'm very aware that women in England are at a disadvantage. So the fight was about that. The fight was about getting a menopause out there on the political agenda and raising awareness for it. And HRT became the poster girl. But hey, whatever it takes to get the message out.
You live in Wales, and am I right in thinking people in Wales don't pay for prescriptions? People in Scotland, is it right that prescriptions are free in Scotland as well? And I don't know what the situation is in Northern Ireland. Is it the same? Right, so it's just us lot in England who have to pay for it, and we've been paying for HRT every month or whatever, however often we need it each time. Can I just say a massive, massive thank you on behalf of the English?
Yes.
As long as you don't beat us at rugby, then that's fine.
Can't promise that, Carolyn. Come on.
No. No, but I think that is tremendous, and I don't think even a lot of people even know or realise that this is the case.
This is huge. I mean, this is costing a lot of people a lot of money, and it is a life-changing set of drugs.
What will it cover? Will it cover everything that a woman might need
on
HRT?
Well, I asked that question last Wednesday in the chamber, and somebody sent me something today which has been published somewhere else. I've not been told the answer, but according to this article, it's all HRT products. So I've written again to the minister today to say, very nice that you managed to get this published somewhere. How about telling the person who asked the question before you go telling everybody? Didn't quite say in those words. I did use parliamentary language, but I could use choice language very, very many times. And the way that this government treats women's health, it's just, it's effing appalling.
It is effing appalling. I love the way you keep using our brand. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, so we're going to get cheaper prescriptions thanks to you. Now we just need to get the supply sorted as well. I've had to get progesterone off a friend. I mean, it's impossible to get some HRT at the moment in England.
Black market. There's literally black market dealing.
But there's a way to solve that problem, and that is to have a national formulary. So at the moment, all local health boards decide what products they will make available in the pharmacies and what products doctors can prescribe. So it has to go through a committee, which anything that goes through a bloody committee is going to take forever and a day, isn't it? But if we had the national formulary, then all products would be available on... So when you go to the doctor, you got a sciatica, and they type in sciatica, they get a list of the medication that's available locally. And the same with HRT. So they put in HRT and they get a list of what's available locally. But if you're not stocking everything, or you're not recommending everything, then some products will be stockpiled, which we know they are, and other products, which you are stocking, go out of stock really quickly. Now, the government would say that any doctor can prescribe any medication, which is true. But if you are a busy GP, your go-to place is going to be the list of medication which your local health board has guaranteed will be available to you to be able to prescribe. You're not going to start trolling the internet looking for other medication that you probably don't know exists anyway. So that's the problem.
It's got to be made simpler, hasn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Well, as we're finally talking about the menopause, are we right if we get slightly personal and ask you about your menopause journey, Carolyn? Because we've all got one and everyone's had a different experience of it, really. What was yours?
Well, mine is probably not dissimilar to many other people in that I was ignorant that I was menopausal. So I did not know I was menopausal. They mentioned losing Martin. So that played a big role in my menopause, because when I lost Martin, I spent the following years trying to fill my world up with things that wouldn't allow me to stop and think about the enormity of losing a child. I had Stuart. I had two kids at that point. I had Martin, I had Stuart. I lost Martin, so I'm left with Stuart. Roll on to 2001. I hit 40, and I get pregnant again. So Tom is born in 2001. 2003, I get pregnant again. I'm like, my God, now what's going on here? I have an ectopic pregnancy. So from then until 2010, I had really bad periods. So they are erratic. There's no pattern to them. Some of them were heavy, some were nothing. So in 2010, I bled for about 6 or 7 months, and I bled continually. Gosh. I was literally going through about 30 or 40 sanitary towels. It was horrendous.
Wow.
So I eventually went to my GP and ended up in hospital almost immediately after being seen. The good nurse said, "Oh, here comes the woman who's the walking dead." So I'd gone so anemic after losing all this blood, they couldn't even do any investigation. So within like 48 hours, I had a couple of pints of blood, I had a pint of iron. They did the investigation, found massive fibroids, removed them, never had a period since. So first thing, I don't know when my periods ended and the fibroids started bleeding. That's the first thing. Second thing, I come out to hospital and I go into this deep depression. I'm trying to rationalise this and think, why would I be going into this depression? So I put it down to the fact that I'm physically weak, I'm psychologically weak, and I'm emotionally weak. This is the first time I've allowed myself to stop because I can't do anything. So I'm re-grieving Martin. So I convinced myself I'm having a nervous breakdown. I convinced my GP I'm having a nervous breakdown. And I end up on antidepressants. There were times during the early days when on top of the antidepressants, I was also having Valium and diazepam. I didn't have a prescription of diazepam. I had like 3 tablets for the really bad times. And 5 months into being on antidepressants and not being in work, I start catastrophizing that if I don't go back to work, my wages will stop, My husband would leave me. My house would be repossessed. My kids would be taken into care. All these things. So I forced myself to go back into work. So then I go back to work and I'd spend the next 4 years working, but doing the same old thing, which is push, not allowing myself to think about things. I've had symptoms, but I put it down to the fact that I was getting older. Never in a million years did I associate the sickness, the flushes, because they weren't all the time. I didn't constantly have flushes. I had one every month or so, but not enough for me to think, oh, I'm having all flushes. I couldn't get up off the chair, you know. I put it down to the fact that I was still weak after having the operation. Mood swings, you know, anxiety. My nails were brittle. My hair was thinning. Anyway, none of this, I didn't link anything up at all. Became an MP in 2015, and then I was really tired. So I was really pushing myself every day to do my work. And I didn't want to go away. I didn't want to go on holidays. I didn't want to go out because I was too tired. And I would say, look, I'm away all week in London. Why do I want to go away? I'd rather come home and spend time with my family than to jump on a plane. And I'd worry about, right, I've got to pack the clothes. I've got to come home and wash the clothes. I've got to put the clothes, oh God, it was all too much. And I was even talking to women and supporting other women on their menopause, talking about it in the chamber and saying, I sail through mine, sail through it. But I do sympathise with women who are menopausal. I was talking about the bloody symptoms and I still wasn't recognising.
God.
And then one day it was somebody put a mic on and I realised I'm talking about other women. I'm talking about myself. I'm menopausal.
Yeah.
And then another 2 years, having embraced my menopause, it took me another 2 years to actually go and get HRT.
So first of all, why did it take so long for the penny to drop, do you think? And you, by the way, you're not alone because almost everyone we've had on this podcast, including everyone that presents it, has had the same experience. Why does it take us so long?
Ignorance, lack of knowledge, lack of awareness. I mean, nobody spoke to me about menopause. My mother certainly didn't. I mean, my mother and her sisters had a conversation about one of my aunties, didn't call it the menopause, they'd come up with some other name for it. And told me to leave the room because it wasn't right for me to hear these things. I was 36. God. You know, I had two bloody children.
Oh my God.
But no, it wasn't right. And I mean, I used to think it was because it was a Welsh thing that, you know, fashioned and we stayed and we reserved and we don't talk about these things. But now I know that most women have not had the conversation about menopause. No, we're only now talking about periods. You know, it's taken us all these years to talk about periods. Now we're comfortable with periods. Let's start on the menopause. But, you know, we just need to talk about it. The more we talk about it, the better we'll be.
Gosh, definitely.
But still another 2 years for once you understood it to then get your right medication as well. So
because, I mean, I thought I couldn't take it, that I was too old. Because I'd never looked into this, because nobody'd ever told me about it, I didn't know getting the HRT was possible for me. I thought, oh, I won't get HRT, I'm too old. And when I did go, I went private because I was terribly, terribly concerned that my doctor would say, well, no. You know, and I didn't want to have the argument. I just didn't want to have the fight. And by now, I'd been convinced that I needed to try it. And I went and paid private. I got it. I've now since gone back to my GP and I get it for free. Not testosterone, by the way. I still pay privately for that because you can't get it on prescription yet, but we're working on that.
Okay.
But,
well, we were supposed to record a few months ago, weren't we? And I remember you had to cancel because you had lost your. What happened?
Oh, done. Now, if anybody's seen the bit of campaign I've had on with the delivery company, here's how it started.
Oh yes, yeah.
I'd ordered 2 tubes of testosterone because I reasoned that it was one prescription cost for the 2 tubes. So I was better off spending the 200 quid or having 2 tubes than spending 130 and having 1 tube. So I bought 2 tubes. Testosterone, I get an email to say it's been delivered. I get an email to say it has been delivered. I get a photograph showing it's been delivered.
Classic.
I didn't look at the photograph. I just said to my husband, as my testosterone arrived, he said, no, I don't know, there's loads of parcels here. So I get home and I go through one. I mean, I'm like, looking these open, thinking, where's my testosterone? It's not there. So I then go online and look at the photograph. It's not my bloody front door.
Oh, God.
So I send my husband out with a photograph of somebody's front door,
Brilliant.
knocking around the street, says that you've got to knock the front door when you find it and tell her, I've got to have my stuff back.
This is like a murder mystery, isn't it?
I know.
But I think when I spoke to you, you were running around Swansea also delivering other people's parcels, weren't you? That had been incorrectly delivered to you whilst you were trying to find your testosterone.
I come home and I get somebody else's parcels. All my parcels are missing. I'm like, testosterone is on somebody's front door. It was horrendous. It's all sorted now. Well, it's not all sorted, but I've had my testosterone. So we're all right on that one.
Thank God. She found her effing hormones, everyone.
Yeah, I did find my effing hormones.
And you took every to task over it as well.
Yeah, I didn't actually mention in the chamber about my testosterone, but I should have. I should have said, and I didn't tell him about my effing hormones.
And this is why I'm effing swearing my head off right now.
Hi, gang. Just to let you know, we did actually contact Every, and here is what they said. Over the busy Christmas period, we faced a unique set of challenges, including unprecedented volumes, the Royal Mail strikes, and labour shortages. Despite incredible efforts from our people, our service was not as good as we would have liked. However, we are committed to redoubling our efforts this year, including a focus on recruitment and our customer service. We met with Carolyn Harris to understand her and other consumers' concerns and are acting on them. Right, let's get back to the interview. This is your challenge. We wanted to use the phrase effing hormones in Parliament next. That's, I think, what we need to hear.
Well, I'll find a way. I will find a way. There's something on a Thursday. I can't do it tomorrow because I'm speaking in the city tomorrow. I'm speaking as one of the large banks in the city about menopause.
Oh, right.
On a Thursday, there's a session in the House of Commons, and it's business questions. It's when the leader in the House comes to the dispatch box, and you can basically ask them anything. So I like to use that occasion. I did bring Every up then, actually, but more often than not, I do something like there may be a charity in my constituency, by me giving them a mention, get a press release out of it, and whatever. So I will find a way of asking the leader of the House something about effing hormones. And I will get her to say effing hormones. I'm not sure how we'll do this, but we'll do it.
That would be...
This is the best thing ever. We're impressed. I believe in you, Carolyn. You can do this. You can do it. So what will you be telling this big bank then about the menopause? What words of advice for them?
Well, it's not so much advice. It's just it's awareness raising. And, I'm doing these all the time. I've gone to several cities, including my own, and gone to loads of companies. And it's a bit like a fireside chat. So I talk to them about my experience, and I give the women in the audience the opportunity to understand that they're not alone and something in my story may resonate with them. It gives an opportunity for the men in the audience to actually think, and men usually are the first to come up to me after and say, I really get it now. And I didn't realise what my wife was going through, or I didn't realise what my partner or my mother or my sister was going through. And it gives employers an opportunity to hear honest, frank conversation about how they can make their workplace better. And I find that the big companies are really receptive to this because they understand they are losing talent and they're not attracting talent because of the menopause. So many women walk away from work.
It's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm glad that more companies are waking up to that.
Companies are waking up to that, but recently there was some recommendations made by, is it the Women Equalities Committee?
Yeah.
About, what can you tell us about
Oh,
that?
can I swear?
Yes.
Yeah,
You can on a
go
podcast.
ahead.
You fucking can, Carolyn. Do it.
So I was so fucking annoyed last week. So it's the Women and Equalities Select Committee, of which I'm a member, and the recommendations are around being very similar to what the APPG have recommended. They wanted specific menopause leave. So it doesn't get counted in sick leave. It's not saying you need a long space of time away from work to get in to adjust. This was about, if you are not well today, that it doesn't go on your sickness record because it's menopause leave. And they rejected it because they said it was discriminatory to men.
What?
It's just appalling.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what we were asking them to do was such common sense things. But I mean, for me, they said there was no necessity for companies to have a menopause policy. Now, this isn't a statutory policy. This is businesses having some kind of framework by which they have worked and talked to their employers and how best they feel that they can continue in work with, and they're not even adaptations. They like making sure you've got enough uniform, then you haven't got overbearing uniform, then you can have a window open, that there's a fan available, that you can work flexible, you can come in later, go, these kinds of things. And by saying to companies, you don't need to do that, for me, it was dismissing women completely out of hand. But they just so short-sighted. They cannot see the benefits.
Didn't they try to twist
work.
it as well and say that it may encourage companies not to take on women because they'd have to, bend over backwards and do all these things in case they hit the menopause while they're employed by them?
They do tend to twist things, and the least they say about that, the better. The only thing that they did agree to, and I was really shocked by this, they agreed to introduce the once annual fee payment for HRT. Didn't realise it was their idea, but let's give them a round of applause. They did absolutely nothing. Nothing. They just said they were going to do what they had to do because of what I managed to bring in.
It was mainly them saying no to things, wasn't it, as well?
They said no to everything.
They also rejected about making it a protected characteristic.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to that?
Their argument was that we would be covered under the disability legislation. Menopause isn't a disability.
It's not a disability. It's not a disability.
It's a condition. So
is that saying like being pregnant?
Well,
disability?
exactly. So
God's
it's
sake.
just short-sightedness, isn't it? I mean, it's going to come down to ignorance, money, and being afraid to be brave. Cowards, in other words, and it just.
Do they think it's all a bit too woke? This is this what part of? I mean,
I don't think they'd say that, but it could be a bit of that. And ministers not being strong enough to fight the corner for women, despite being women themselves.
But isn't the leader of that committee, the chair of that committee?
I mean, she's as angry as I am.
I bet. But this is what I mean. Like, I think this is what the fact that you get such wide cross-party support on a lot of what you say.
Because it makes
hopefully
sense.
in time,
it makes sense.
Hopefully in time, there's a collective thing across all the parties.
What I would say is there are 13 million menopausal women in the country. The first party that comes forward and says they're going to do something to help them, and it's an election winner for me.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Do you think you can revisit these reasonable adjustments, really, is what they are, isn't it? Do you think you can revisit them or they'll ever get passed?
Not with this government, they won't. This government just are not interested in doing anything. But then this government are, they are literally dying on the vine. So we just have to work on the next potential government when I may have a slight advantage.
Ooh, I was hoping.
Oh, I like
so
it.
One of the big things...
Fighting talk.
Yeah, so one of the big things we haven't talked about yet is another thing that they rejected, which was mandatory training for doctors, right?
Insane. Absolutely insane. So 41% of medical schools have not got mandatory menopause training on the curriculum. So you have doctors who qualify who know nothing about the menopause. That's a hell of a lot of doctors out there, and those that do have done about 2 hours, then 40 symptoms. So by the time you've read through the 40 symptoms, you've done your 2 hours, haven't you? That is why so many women are not being diagnosed, because the doctors don't understand what's happening to the women. That's why women are so important to other women, because it's talking, communicating and sharing, which is actually diagnosing each other on the fact they're menopausal.
Yeah.
After those 13 million menopausal women in the country, and 14% are being diagnosed and are having support and treatment. And I bet the high proportion of them has actually gone private.
Yeah, well, I certainly had to do that to get HRT because I was palmed off with antidepressants, like a lot of people we know were. But I have to say, I think this is the one thing that has made all of us the most angry. And weirdly, it's had the least amount of coverage in the news, and it's all been about the leave and the protected characteristics, and no one's been talking about this. Why do you think that is, Carolyn?
I don't know. I mean, the media are funny. I've done quite a lot of interviews around everything, and I've done a couple of op-eds on it and opinion pieces, and I've done there's two potential articles in the pipeline. The media pick up on the headline. So once one person have got the headline, the others play catch up with it. The rest of the stuff seems to drip out. That's my job, is to drip feed it out as often as I can and mention it as often as I can in different environments, different articles. And so I've done quite a lot. I did an article last night. I spoke to a journalist, and that was for the New Statesman, and we talked about the doctors in there. I've done two op-eds, one for Politics Live and one for the Telegraph, I think it was. And I mentioned about the doctors there. So we will keep the pressure up. And we've got so much ammunition, we can keep going till this Christmas on coming out with the bits they haven't done.
Gosh.
And do you feel like you're a lone
No.
voice? I mean, obviously, it's good.
No.
In terms of the media, though, in terms of how...
The media are really interested in this. You know, every day I see a journalist in Popan Sound, so I hear from a journalist, or, I speak to a journalist on the telephone or something, and every day somebody is saying, we want to do a piece on this, we want to do a piece on that. I mean, people... And I believe, and I know I'm right, there is no area of social policy where there isn't a dimension which is affected by the menopause. So I'm doing a series of roundtables, if you like. Like last week, we had people from the criminal justice system in. So we had barristers, we had prison officers, we had medical staff from within the prison, we had charities who work in prison, we had prison officers. So we had a mixture of people there who were talking about what it's like to be working in the system, in the prison system, when you're menopausal. And what about the women are in there? How many are there because of the menopause has led them to do something silly and they've ended up in prison? How many of them in there are menopausal and have been days out until the sentence because of bad behaviour? Now, how many are there and they haven't got adequate access to clean clothes, showers, sanitary products? How is that affecting them? So that's one area. Then I talked to family barristers who were telling me that the consequences for women, divorce goes up during menopause. How many women make decisions during a divorce settlement, assuming they're going to be in work for another 20 years? For example, buying your spouse out of a property. You take the mortgage based on your income there and then. Within 5 years, you can't afford to pay the mortgage because you've had to reduce your hours. So you end up on a sickness benefit and the state ends up paying the interest on your mortgage. You know, you may be in a job and you can't do the job. So you end up reducing your hours. You don't pay full national insurance. So when you actually do get your state pension, you're going to get a reduced pension. You're going to be dependent on pension credits to top up your pension. So you become a burden on the state. You could end up, domestic violence increases in menopause. And that's both ways. So a lot of domestic violence starts because the woman doesn't want to have sex and the partner doesn't understand that. So there's violence. Some women are victims and suddenly retaliate and they end up being in court for being perpetrators of domestic violence. And some women may make really bad decisions which lead them to the criminal justice system. Some women become addicted to something that takes their mind off the menopause, like alcohol, like drugs, like problem gambling. 3 o'clock in the morning, you've got nobody to talk to, you're at a loose end, you're frightened, you don't know why you feel like you feel. All of a sudden, you go on your phone and there's an advert, come and play online bingo. Once you're in that trap, you can't get away from it. So when you think about all the areas of social policy, where if we were just thinking about the menopause, we may have not made the decision that we made in that policy, or we might have put it a different way to protect women. It's not about special treatment. It's about giving us normality. So my job is to, and I'm really serious about this, is to look at every single area of social policy and demonstrate to the decision makers how much better policy could be if they given consideration to the menopause.
Do you know, that was just fascinating
Bloody
listening
hell.
to that. And I mean, I've worked in prisons, so has Bina, and I've never even thought about the impact of menopause on those women in the prison that I work with. I never even thought about it because I was a bit younger at the time and it just wasn't my thinking.
You know, you're locked up for 24 hours a day. You know, I've been in there and they've been banging the doors. I know they've got mental health problems. Have they? I mean, how many women did we lock up in asylums for being hysterical? How many of them were menopausal women?
Well, they say that, don't they? I mean, there's a lot of anecdotes about people of our mum's generation who got carted off. Well, that's what they'd say, wouldn't it? They get carted off because, you know, she'd lost it or it was their time of life or whatever. But, yeah, I mean, it's there throughout history.
And the witches, I guess, as well.
And the witches.
And the wife could be a witch.
Hysteria.
Hysteria, the name hysteria comes from the womb, doesn't it? The womb, is it Latin?
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's hysterectomy, isn't it?
Above my head now. You're above my head. We're talking Latin.
She's
I'm not going about it.
Might be Greek. It might be Greek.
It's all Greek to me.
Could be great, yeah.
It's all Greek to me.
It's all Dutch.
So we've covered quite a lot there, but what else is it that you're looking to get changed? How else are you looking to change policy to make life a bit better for people, for women in midlife?
These things come to me. So if somebody comes to me tomorrow and says, have you thought about, I will think about it. So I don't know one else. I just know that I've got a long agenda and I want to change. I want to make sure that companies respect women. I want justice system to reflect on menopausal women. I want the Home Office to reflect on it. I want BAs to reflect. I just want every area to give them consideration as to how they can make life better and more normal for menopausal women. Because the country gains, and if we get it right, we can share that message, and the world gets it right. You know, I just cannot believe it's 2022, and we now having the conversations about something that has affected over 50% of the population. 23, yeah. For all these years.
Finally, at the end of January.
We've lost years, haven't we? Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. And is one of the things you're pushing for everyone to have checks at 45? Is that something you're keen on?
Well, yeah, I mean, we said 45 because it seemed to be the age that people were suggesting. And there is no catch-all age, is there?
No.
But I would like every time a woman goes to the doctors and has a smear, you know, to have a leaflet to understand what the menopause is. Every time they go and have a coil fitted, have a chat about the menopause. But at some point during that early 40s, a physical sit-down appointment with the doctor that says, this is going to be, if not with you, then it's round the corner. And know that this is, because otherwise it's like a bloody freight train, isn't it? And it just sits you, and you don't know what's wrong with you. That's why we have so many women committing suicide.
But that's the problem, isn't it? If the doctors don't know what it is, I mean, my GP said, oh, you won't experience any menopausal symptoms till you're 51. I was 42 when I started having perimenopause and migraines and tension headaches and palpitations, and I was sent for all sorts of heart checks and everything, and lots of symptoms until I was 45. So 3 years before a GP said to me, actually, I think you're going into menopause. But if nobody knows that, there's no point having these appointments if the staff don't know what the... I mean, it's not just doctors, is it? It's practice nurses who can help, and pharmacists.
Of course it is. But
and others.
I would like to see it on the QOF. So do you know what the QOFs are?
No.
So the QOFs are...
quality outcomes framework.
So if you go to a doctor with a bad foot and they do a blood test, you think, what the hell are doing that for? But there are certain medical conditions which they get incentivised for pre-guessing. So they will know if your cholesterol is high, so they will work out how many people in their surgery potentially will have heart disease in 10 years' time based on your cholesterol now, that kind of thing. There's nothing on the QOFs about women's health. So if a doctor had to look at the menopause for the QOFs, they'd all want to get trained on it because it'd be incentivised. So if we put it on the QOFs, then we're doing women a great service. Then the health check would be all part of the doctor's QOF, so that they could guess how many women in their surgery are going to be hitting the menopause in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, so on and so forth.
I mean, it shocks me that demographic kind of assessment isn't done.
Nothing.
So, oh my God. It's even worse than I thought.
Oh, it is.
Honestly.
It is
actually even
really
worse than I
bad.
thought.
And that's why we have to, that's why I'm saying there's no one thing I want to do. There's loads of things I want to do, but they will prioritise themselves. I don't want to say this is more important than that. The first one was raising awareness. We've done that when we had the private members bin. Now we take everything that happens and we make it a major issue. And we bang the drum on that area until we get some kind of success. And we start talking about the next really important thing. And so on and so forth.
You're doing amazing work with menopause because you have raised awareness. And I mean, I was talking to a colleague recently and I was saying how we were going to be speaking to you. And I was saying it's such a shame that none of the recommendations have been, well, one of them, but all the rest, I think there were 12, haven't been passed. And I said, it's so frustrating. And she said, well, actually, people are talking about it, so it's working. And and she totally flipped it around. Her name's Emma. She totally flipped it around. She said, everybody's talking about it. She said, you're talking about it. Your podcast's talking about it. My friends are talking about it. My colleagues are talking about it. And I thought, actually, 2-3 years ago, before we did this podcast, nobody was talking about perimenopause. Nobody was talking about menopause. Nobody was talking about women's suicide rates. All these things are getting the attention they need and they deserve. Yeah. So you're doing an amazing job because you are raising this awareness. I mean, we're not necessarily getting all the results we want right now, but 2 years ago, that wasn't even in the public discourse, was it?
But we will get there because bit by bit, the decision makers will realise that we're right. Because the more we can show them how much better women are when they get the right treatment, the more we are proving our own argument. And I think there are more women now than there were 2 years ago actually getting the right treatment because they now know what to ask for.
And I think, do you think that the whole discussion around menopause is opening up the whole wider question of women's health equality and access
definitely.
For women with endometriosis? Or
Definitely. Because you can't have one without the other. You can't talk about one part of women's health without talking about women's health per se. So, definitely. Absolutely.
Just off the back of all of that, all the incredible work you're doing, everything that you said, what can we do? What can people...
What you're doing
there's
now.
So many people who are... Well, we've got a podcast, but everyday people who are at home, there's so much crap in the news about politics. So many of my friends who are otherwise, politically can be quite engaged, have disengaged because of all the nonsense that's going on. And my fear is that we will lose the conversation or the conversation will get quieter. So how can people listening to us at home or, what can we tell people? What can we get people to do?
Well, talk and engage. I mean, there is nothing better to get this message out than talk. But there's only one way we're going to change things, and that's the politics. And sometimes people need to understand that even though this is a women's health issue, we need the politicians to make the change. So they must lobby their politician. Write a letter to the politician. Ask them, have they joined my APPG? What's their thoughts on the menopause? Have they, if I put in for a debate, make sure that they turn up and speak, or at least ask me the question. Because the more and more politicians who are engaged, the more chance we got of making politics a better place and influencing policy decisions and influencing decisions and influencing and prioritising women's place in society, because we are not, we've come so far, but we've got so much further to go. And don't stop halfway, you just got to keep going. If a dinner lady from Swansea can make changes, then anybody can make changes.
Yes, Carolyn. I'm
there we
falling
go.
in love with you here. This is amazing. But you are so empowering. It's exactly right. You're a dinner lady from Swansea.
Yeah.
But you're not just any dinner lady from Swansea.
Yeah, but I am. It's just that I'm maybe gulbier. And I've got nothing to lose about it. I always said when I'm not smarting, no matter what else happens in life, nothing's can ever hurt me that much. So I think I carry that now in that I'm not afraid to ask. Some people are afraid to ask questions in case they're stupid questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. And if you don't ask what's on your mind, how are you going to change things? If you're always wondering, if you're too afraid to ask the question, how the hell are you going to change anything in life? So I'm not special, but I know I have this attitude that if it needs to be moved, I don't want to phone somebody up to come and move it for me. I can pick it up and move it myself. And that's what I do.
Ooh, thank God. Well, thank God there are politicians like you.
Did losing your son, did losing Martin become a bit of a driver for you with making changes? And
definitely,
you know,
I wouldn't be what I am now if I hadn't lost Martin. I had a decision to make. I mean, I had two decisions to make. The one on the night I lost him, when I sat in the bath, and I made a decision whether I would go to him or stay with Stuart. And I did a mathematical calculation about who had who. I decided to stay. That was the first decision. And then the next decision was that I could either go down and sink so low that, you know, my life would be worthless, or I could go the other way and try to do something to make him proud. And I went the other way and tried to make him proud.
My God, he'd be proud. I'm just feeling so emotional just hearing you talk because, you know, we've all lost people that are close to us, but to lose a child is, something unimaginable.
And I give him a legacy. You know, the Children's Fund is Martin's fund. That's his legacy. No matter what ever happens in my life, I give him a legacy. And I won't go away. So I'm absolutely certain that we've changed the narrative, we have changed the agenda, we've changed the environment, and women are at last getting what they need to have, which is normality.
Well, we're behind you, man. Every step of the damn way,
absolutely.
we'll throw everything at it that we can, for sure. We're here, right behind you.
Amen to all of that, and thank you so much for coming on Effin Hormones, and thank you so much for everything you do for all women and being an absolute menopause warrior. Carolyn Harris, everybody. Woo!
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks,
Whoop, whoop.
Thank you.
Wow, what an interview, what a woman. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling really empowered. That was a real call to action for all of us. So I hope that you can get involved in this menopause revolution as well. A massive thank you to Carolyn Harris MP. And that is it for this episode of Effin Hormones. You'll hear from us again in around a month's time. Remember, if you like what you hear and you've got something useful out of it, do click on the Be an Effin Star section on effinhormones.com, and please drop us a couple of quid to help us make Effin Hormones. We totally get that it's a difficult time of year, and in fact a very difficult year, so all that you're able to do or give, we are very, very grateful. And as well as that, if you can please rate us, review us and follow this podcast, it just means that more people get to hear about us, which is all good. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your love. Bye. Bye. Bye.